The hero is only as good as the villain, wise words that will never grow old. After all, a protagonist won't be able to prove just how much they can do if there isn't much to do in the first place. This goes for both physical strength and mental fortitude. An opponent who is at least as dynamic as the main character challenges them to do more than they previously believed they could, or more than they ever expected would be necessary. These villains are the major source of conflict, and they have occasionally been enough to spark entire franchises that either lasted a good while or even continue to this day. Impressive feats for sure, as they've become more than just moneymakers at that point. These characters are cultural touchstones.
A major franchise is likely to have more than just one villain. Star Wars, for instance, has various antagonists trained in the dark side. Rocky goes up against a different opponent in almost every movie, and the Toy Story characters come under threat from someone else every time. It's also important to note that you don't have to be the most powerful villain in the franchise to be the most compelling one. As the following entries show, the best villains from major franchises are nuanced, genuinely sinister, symbolically rich, marvelously executed, culturally significant with trademark peculiarities, and, most of all, they're lots of fun to watch.
Number 10, Jurassic Park's Raptors, the Jurassic Park franchise. Jurassic Park belongs to that rare breed of perfect sci-fi movies, and there's a reason why it begins with a scene in which a velociraptor brings severe injury to someone trying to transport her. Despite the awesome presence of the T-Rex, the raptors are the ultimate antagonists of this story. The first time the main characters are brought to the raptor cage, all they can see is the dense greenery of their habitat and the live cow that's about to get torn apart.
The way that we only hear what they do to their meal is horrifying. Then we behold the mangled remnants of the metal device used to transport it, and suddenly the dangers these raptors pose is striking. Among the most compelling characters in Jurassic Park, the raptors wreak havoc in a way that brings the film's warning about playing God clearly and effectively. Along with the suspense they produce and the breakthrough in special effects needed to bring them to life, these creatures show that you don't need catchy lines, or even intelligible dialogue, to be excellent villains.
Number 9, Hans Gruber, the Die Hard franchise. Die Hard is the quintessential holiday action movie, and much of the credit goes to Hans Gruber, played by the great Alan Rickman. Gruber exudes confidence in such a calm and almost respectable manner that we can see him as a guy who has thought everything through. Posing as a terrorist when he's really just a thief, Gruber manages to elevate his role as action movie villain into something a little more sophisticated, and certainly more interesting. He's able to keep his cool and think on his feet better than his henchmen, like when he tells one of them to shoot the glass. Hans is definitely the boss.
Rickman's German accent might not be the most consistent, but it's enough to give off a European vibe that completely contrasts with John McClane's blunt force, cowboy persona. The best parts of the movie might be when these two are speaking to each other over the radio. Gruber shows lots of personality here. He can even be funny. Die Hard has sparked many lookalikes, but none of them has yet to have a bad guy who's on Han's level.
Number 8, Oric Goldfinger, the Bond franchise. Oric Goldfinger, Gert Frobe, is the third and arguably most iconic villain in the Bond franchise. A bullion dealer who tends to kill people by covering them in gold paint, Goldfinger is even more legendary for having one of the coolest henchmen ever, Oddball, who throws a bowler that can cut through a statue. Bond thinks his name sounds like a French nail varnish. He's said to be British, and his accent sounds more German. He cheats at cards and golf, making for fun sequences in which Bond gets the better of him.
His plan, known as Operation Grand Slam, is to break into the U.S. bullion depository by releasing a nerve gas into the building. Of course, one cannot write about Goldfinger without mentioning the famous scene in which Bond is strapped to a table with the laser beam heading toward him, at which point Goldfinger says,
"I don't expect you to talk, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die."
With homages that range from Austin Powers in Goldmember to one of The Simpsons' best parodies, this villain has left his golden mark on cinema.
Number 7. Heath Ledger's Joker, Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. Some call Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight the best iteration of the Joker, at least in live action. This was the grittiest take on the character at the time, which not only aligned perfectly with director Christopher Nolan's aesthetic but also let the character feel a little more realistic. The psychological damage is very apparent, and yet the Joker loses none of his trademark humor whatsoever. The pencil trick, the way he can just show up at a mob meeting and walk away, the unexpected reference to Jerry Maguire in the middle of an interrogation, it's all very funny.
This interpretation of the character keeps making up stories about himself to people, specifically regarding how he got the scars on each side of his mouth. He may look like he's always smiling, but the stories he tells aren't happy at all. Who knows just how true they are, which is part of his appeal. Along with small but no less significant idiosyncrasies, like how he licks his lips, it's no surprise that Ledger won a posthumous Oscar for his role. Paving the way for Joaquin Phoenix to get his own Oscar, this is more than just one of the greatest movie villain performances of the 2000s, it's one of the best of all time.
Number 6. The T-1000, the Terminator franchise. Terminator 2, Judgment Day is widely considered the best installment in the Terminator franchise, and it definitely has the best villain. As great as the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, was in the first movie, they wisely stepped things up for the legendary sequel. Played with cold precision by Robert Patrick, the T-1000 is one of a cyborg to be up against. Its liquid metal composition makes it nearly impossible to destroy, it can take the form of other people, it can turn itself into any shape, usually weapons, and it can do all the things that the T-800 can do.
While it's essential for an action movie like this to have a villain who is extraordinarily difficult to beat, it's also important to make sure that the T-800 and other protagonists can believably fend it off for as long as they do. If this thing could, say, take the form of a bullet and shoot itself at John, the movie would either be over or render itself unable to suspend disbelief when its target got away. The rules of the T-1000 were therefore carefully drawn out and established, and it couldn't be more thrilling.
Number 5. Hannibal Lecter, the Hannibal Lecter franchise. The Silence of the Lambs is one of the most perfectly acted movies ever made, but the most well-known figure in the cast is none other than Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Anthony Hopkins brought so much to this role that sequels, a prequel, and a well-received show about Lecter would be produced. Although Hopkins would star in 2 of these later movies, his first encapsulation of the character is the one that everybody quotes. And there are many terrific quotes to choose from.
Otherwise known as Hannibal the Cannibal, Dr. Lecter is a former psychiatrist who was imprisoned for murder and cannibalism. Clarice Starling, Jodie Foster, seeks his help in figuring out who the serial killer Buffalo Bill is, and every single one of their conversations is fantastic. While Lecter is mostly polite and sophisticated in his demeanor, this masks an extremely violent nature underneath. Along with his desire to get out of this particular prison and at least get a view of the outdoors, this evil genius betrays a complexity unseen in most other antagonists.
Number 4. Voldemort, the Harry Potter franchise. He who shall not be named frightens people to the point where nobody in the wizarding world dare speak his name, so the person who plays him better be scary good. Luckily, he is Ralph Fiennes puts in one of his career's most memorable performances as Lord Voldemort. Otherwise known as the Dark Lord, his remarkable powers in the dark arts gave him the ability to lead an army that almost took over the magical world. Even Voldemort's subjects are afraid of him, and the Death Eaters themselves are pretty spine-chilling on their own.
Though only a half-blood himself, this villain hates Muggles to the point where his group's philosophy is to wipe out those who aren't purebloods, those born of witches and wizards. His backstory is fascinating enough, but Voldemort is a particularly interesting character because of how he is presented throughout the franchise. In both the books and the movies, he starts off in a feeble form. That he succeeds in his struggle to eventually acquire a new body and rebuild his army makes him all the more petrifying. Without a doubt, he helped make Harry Potter one of the most recognizable names in the world.
Number 3, Godzilla, the Godzilla franchise. What's better than Jurassic Park's hyper-intelligent prehistoric reptiles hunting together in the jungle? A radioactive lizard the size of a skyscraper stomping through a major city. Its name is Godzilla, and it has been one of the most popular figures in Japanese culture since it debuted in 1954. The first film's original title was Gojira, and it garnered enough acclaim and box office success to launch a franchise that has lasted to this day. That includes the acclaim and the money. Just last year, Godzilla -1 received the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects and scored big in theaters worldwide.
A potent symbol of the devastation the atomic bombs had on Nagasaki and Hiroshima at the end of World War II, this monster is awakened by nuclear blasts and emerges from the ocean to cause unimaginable destruction. There have been so many different takes on Godzilla that it would be a challenge to watch them all, but the best versions do an excellent job of portraying the horror that a creature of this magnitude elicits. Though sometimes a heroic figure, Godzilla is most famous for being destructive and will likely remain in the public consciousness for another 7 decades.
Number 2, Gollum, the Lord of the Rings franchise. Sauron and Saruman may be good villains, but it's hard to beat Andy Serkis' incredible turn as Gollum, a hobbit who has been physically and psychologically warped over time by his obsession with the ring. It's safe to say that this creature wants that ring on his finger at least as much as Frodo wants to destroy it. The character's voice alone makes him sound like a corrupted soul, and his appearance intensifies that impression tenfold.
Gollum is instrumental in making The Lord of the Rings one of the most rewatchable trilogies of all time, as his travels with Frodo and Sam drive the plot forward. He helps them get to Mordor, in the hopes that he will be able to steal the ring from Frodo. However, like many other well-written villains, there is a kinder side to him. Gollum talks to, and often argues with, himself, one side being greedy for the ring and the other more trusting of Master Frodo. Nothing is more important than the precious, though, a quote that fans will reference until the end of time.
And number 1, the powerful yet ruthless Sith Lord in service to the newly risen Galactic Empire, Darth Vader, the Star Wars franchise. He's got the most iconic mask in movie history, the most iconic voice in movie history, the most iconic costume in movie history, and probably the most iconic quote in movie history.
No. I'm your father.
Voiced by James Earl Jones and played physically by David Prowse in the original trilogy, Vader uses the dark side to force-choke his fellow bosses of the Empire when they show a lack of faith in the Force or fail to accomplish certain tasks. All he has to do is breathe to make your blood run cold.
Ignoring how George Lucas butchered Vader's early days in the prequels, this antagonist's backstory in the original trilogy makes him an even more interesting character. He was trained by Obi-Wan, turned to the dark side, and has become one of the most feared people in the galaxy. His relationship to Luke's mentor, not to mention his relationship to Luke, not only makes him more complex but makes the good guys more engaging, too. In addition to his cool command and eventual redemption, Vader is perhaps the greatest villain in movie history.